Okay. Yeah, so the president this morning has questioned really whether or not we can go forward with the election. And, one thing that as politicians and people who, ran campaigns and stuff, that we don't get to choose is election day. And, we've got a pretty solid record throughout our history of having elections under very difficult times, whether it be other pandemics, whether it be the Civil War or World War II, one and two. So elections are going to happen. But does that mean it's going to be easy? No. Everything is more difficult since COVID, and elections aren't going to be any different. Well, you would have to have buy-in from the states. Elections are by and large state by state operations. Here in Tennessee, we're getting ready to have a primary election next Thursday. We have a very heated Republican Senate primary going on. And I've got my mail-in ballot right here. So we're going to get a good idea next week how this process is going to work and or not work. But back to your question of what would we do? It would take state by state buy-in, and it would also take buy-in from the people. And then you've also got the situation constitutionally, the president's term ends January 20th, 2021. So even if we did push it back, and so maybe we delay it a few weeks, but that date is still looming. So if you don't have an election by that date, what happens? I haven't looked that far. That sounds about right. The succession order is president, vice president, speaker. So that would sound like a reasonable place to go. The fact that we're having these discussions is pretty extraordinary. Yeah. Yes, you're exactly right that this is really nothing new. Mail-in ballots have been used for many, many years, whether it be for people in the military, seniors in Tennessee have been able to vote by mail-in ballot for a long time. Disabled people with disabilities, people who take care of people with disabilities. A lot of political figures, because they're in Washington or whatever, use this process. So it's worked, and it's worked well for a long, long time. But we've never had this number of people doing it. So it's how well they're prepared to handle the volume is what we've really got to watch. And let's watch next Thursday when Tennessee results start coming in, and just see, how long are we going to have to wait for totals? How quickly is this going to work? Well, it's a learning curve. As you know, my wife and I were working with these ballots earlier, and after she sealed it, noticed she didn't sign it in the right place. So she was here with a knife, reopening it to make sure. So it's a learning curve, both for those of us doing it and for the people conducting the elections. So I look for some hiccups next week. But I'm hopeful that things will run pretty smoothly. I noticed that their computer cards, they can be pretty quickly, hopefully read. Elections, there's always something that can go wrong. The electricity can go out, voting machines break down. Elections aren't things that necessarily run totally smoothly, but, I think this is a good practice run for Tennessee and other states that are still doing primaries to get ready for what might happen in November when the number of ballots in November will dwarf what we have right now. We'll just overwhelm. So we're going to have huge amounts of participation in November. So any problems, this is really a pretty good dry run. That race has become very interesting. I'll be honest with you, early on, I thought Bill Haggerty had this in the bag. And he had everything going for him. He was he had worked with the Haslam administration, so he kind of had the executive wing or what have you, the establishment wing of the Republican Party. And he had Donald Trump's endorsement as an ambassador to Japan. And he still, I think, is in the lead. But Manny Sefi has made this into a race. And if you look at the endorsements, both of them are getting them, but you look like you were mentioning, the number of ads, the amount of money that both candidates have at their disposal. This is a race. And this one could go really in any direction. It's going to be one of the most interesting thing to follow next Thursday night. And if you look at past performance of Democratic candidates in Tennessee, which has not been good in statewide elections, you've got to assume, barring anything out of the ordinary, that whoever wins this primary is going to be our next senator. Well, that one's going to be by far the one to pay attention to. The 5th District Democratic primary with incumbent Congressman Jim Cooper and challenger Keita Haynes is going to be an interesting race, too. I think Cooper's in control of that race. But, things aren't normal. And, Republicans are getting challenged from the right. Democrats are being challenged from the left. So certainly Congressman Cooper here is being challenged from someone from his left flank. And we'll see really how much power that progressive wing of the Democratic Party has in the 5th Congressional District in Nashville. Yeah, that's an excellent question. It's very, very difficult to tell. Tennessee really does a good job of giving us opportunities to vote early in person. So we have a lot of people that have done that. Election days have gotten down to less than half the people voting. More than half the votes come in now early anyway. So I think a lot of the absentee and a lot of the early vote is probably going to reduce the crowds we see at the poll on election day, and which probably makes things a lot easier to pull this election off. Well, there's going to be an incredible amount of interest in this. There's going to be an incredible amount of interest in this November's election. There's absolutely no doubt. the big thing we've got to watch is how many people choose to go the mail-in route, how many people choose to go the early vote route, and what kind of problems we discover Thursday that we can fix before we get to this overwhelming turnout in November. Great. Good to talk with you. See you. Bye.